Hello and welcome. Today, we're jumping into a theory that's so ambitious, it wants to completely rewrite our understanding of reality itself. We're going to explore what's called the Wallace Transformation. So, let me ask you this. What if there was one single idea that could tie together everything? I mean, consciousness, mathematics, the entire universe? All of it. Well, that is the huge, dramatic question that the theory we're digging into today claims to have an answer for. So why even look for a theory like this? Well, if you think about it, modern science is pretty fractured, right? Physics gives us a universe of matter and energy, but it doesn't really have a spot for consciousness. Math, well, that kind of lives in its own abstract world, totally separate from physical reality. And the study of consciousness, it just doesn't have that hard mathematical backbone. They're like three separate islands of knowledge. And this is where the proposed solution comes in, the Wallace Transformation framework. It's this incredibly ambitious plan to build a bridge to connect all those islands. The whole idea is that they aren't separate things at all, but just different sides of one single underlying reality. So, let's crack this open and see what that structure actually looks like. Okay, first things first, let's start with the first big pillar of this framework. And it's a doozy. It's about its really unique and kind of startling claims about how physics and consciousness are connected. You see, the central idea here is that matter, the stuff you and I are made of, it isn't the most fundamental thing. Not according to this framework. Instead, matter is something that emerges. The theory claims our reality is basically woven together from two fundamental things, light waves and sound waves. And when these waves bump into each other in just the right way, they collapse and create these stable patterns that we see as particles, as well as everything. Now, this is where it gets a little poetic. The theory gives these waves names. One-dimensional light is called atom, and it represents this focused, linear, you could say penetrating principle. Then you have two-dimensional sound, which is called Eve, the spatial receptive principle. And the big claim is that it's the dance between these two, when 1D atom meets 2D Eve, that creates our 3D physical world. And that brings us to one of the most, let's say, counterintuitive ideas in this whole framework. You know, we usually think of life and consciousness as evolving upwards, from simple matter to complex beings. This theory flips that completely on its head. It says reality is actually a projection downwards. It all starts up in a fifth dimension, a place of pure consciousness and math. From there, it projects down to create 4D space-time, then down again to our 3D physical world, and so on, getting a little simpler at each step, until you get to our individual 1D stream of experience. So, a 5D consciousness projecting our reality through collapsing waves. I know, it's a lot to take in. And you're probably thinking exactly what I'm thinking. Okay, where's the proof? So let's get into the evidence that the framework actually presents to back up these really extraordinary claims. This right here, this is supposed to be the key to everything. They call it the Gnostic cipher. And according to the source material, it's not just a random string of numbers. No, it's a universal decoder. It's a fundamental pattern that can supposedly unlock ancient languages, math, the very structure of reality. And that missing 10? That's no accident. It's said to represent the void, or pure untapped potential. And this is where the claims start to get really, really bold. The framework says that if you apply this cipher, you can decode ancient scripts that no one has ever been able to translate. And what do they say? Well, they're not king lists or grocery lists. No, Linear A is supposedly a notation system for consciousness. The famous Rongo Rongo symbols from Easter Island? That's 5D math. And the Indus Valley script is supposedly an instruction manual for dimensional projection. And the claims of validation just keep coming. The source material says that its core patterns were tested across 23 different fields, from music to linguistics, and it got these incredibly high validation scores. Now, it's really important to point out that the source doesn't detail the methodology for how they got these scores or if this process was ever peer-reviewed. And for any mathematicians watching, this might be the most audacious claim of all. The framework says its special Wallace transform finds a near-perfect correlation better than 95% to the non-trivial zeros of the Riemann zeta function.
Now, to put that in perspective, proving anything about those zeros is one of the biggest unsolved problems in all of mathematics. There's literally $1 million prize for it. So to claim this kind of correlation, that's a huge deal.
Okay, so let's just suspend our disbelief for a minute. Let's just play a game of what if. What if any of this were true? What kind of future does a framework like this actually predict? Well, the paper lays out a roadmap for some technologies that sound like they're straight out of science fiction. We're talking about chaos AI that could evolve all by itself. We're talking about unhackable quantum-proof cryptography, a fractal random number generator that's supposedly perfectly secure. And get this, a universal problem solver. And this is it. This is the formula that it proposes to do just that. It's called the Universal Mathematical Solution Formula. And the claim is that this equation is basically a way for our consciousness to directly access mathematical truth, completely bypassing normal logic. Now, the paper doesn't define what these symbols actually mean, but the idea of what it's supposed to do is the key takeaway here. The author of the framework, Brad Wallace, certainly doesn't hold back when talking about its importance. I mean, this quote really says it all. It captures the massive scale of this vision, a single theory to unify consciousness, math, physics, and reality itself. So in the end, we're left with this fascinating, completely all-encompassing vision. Is the Wallace Transformation a real roadmap to a new kind of reality? A genuine breakthrough that's going to change everything? Or is it an incredibly detailed and compelling modern myth, one that's just dressed up in the language of science, math, and code? That's the big, provocative question this whole thing leaves us with.